In case you hadn't noticed, communism is knocking on our door. And if we carry on at this rate, it will break it down. Whilst the pandemic disgracefully saw the West sacrificing its liberal principles by introducing Chinese-style lockdowns to stop COVID, a policy which, in my view, failed spectacularly, it added insult to injury by using establishment media outlets and high-profile scientists and medics to crush debate around COVID measures. And anyone that didn't follow the narrative, whether it was masks, lockdowns or vaccines, was demonised and called a bad person. Those are all techniques adopted by totalitarian regimes. Control the narrative, control the media message, and get ordinary citizens to police each other's thinking. Remember during the pandemic when neighbours were grassing each other up for going out more than once a day? The old curtain twitchers? Well, that's something that Stasi, or indeed Chairman Mao, would have looked upon proudly. The principle that a state directive is for the common good was established during the pandemic and is the ultimate weapon of tyranny, which will continue to be used in relation to other so-called emergencies, including heat waves, energy crises, and climate change. What's shocking is not that this outdated and perpetually discredited ideology of communism is still knocking about. It's the way that the so-called democratic West has allowed it to encroach upon our lives as hard-left woke ideology infects our institutions, our corporations, and the media. The behavioural scientist Susan Michie, nicknamed Stalin's nanny, an advisor to SAGE, has helped to deploy the dark arts of public manipulation. And she shaped, in my view, ultimately a more damaged society with the peddling of masks, lockdowns and self-isolation. These are all deeply illiberal policies, not remotely in the spirit of free democratic societies, which were championed by the likes of Michie, but which have left us with a poorer, sicker, angrier and more diminished society. The push for communism is a global one. If you think I'm exaggerating, the aforementioned Michie has been promoted to a new position of chair of the Behavioural Advisory Group at the World Health Organization, which I like to call the World Hell Organization. Remember, Susan Michie, a self-declared communist. Folks, this is not a drill. Meanwhile, the World Hell Organization are seeking to create an international treaty in which this unelected cabal, which admires China, turned a blind eye to President Xi's COVID cover-up and praised China's pandemic policies, is now going to seek the powers to lock us down and mask us whenever they fancy, irrespective of the views of national governments. So much for sovereignty, eh? And in fact, mild communism has been government policy in this country since March 2020, paying healthy people to stay at home and do nothing, and smashing our economy against a brick wall and closing once viable businesses. That's not very Western, is it? And capitalism, it ain't. The state being responsible not just for your health, but even your income, set a dangerous new precedent, with siren voices from the hard left now calling for inflation-busting pay rises across the whole of the public sector, which risks Venezuelan levels of inflation and Greek levels of debt. And as with all communist regimes, the truth is the first casualty. We're seeing it in Britain. Communist-style woke ideology ignores the basic facts of human biology by declaring that men are women and that women are men. Thank God the wretched Tavistock Centre, which has been chopping organs off youngsters and blocking their puberty with medication, is to be closed down. Here's what my new political hero, Kemi Badenoch, had to say about that decision. She tweeted, "I can't state enough how profound the decision is to close down the Tavistock Centre. There's lots I can say now that I'm no longer Equalities Minister. Personal testimonies, heard of destroyed childhoods, protecting whistleblowing clinicians from endless harassment by Twitter activists." The basic laws of economics have been assaulted with the idea that printing trillions of pounds worth of empty money won't be inflationary and will do no harm. And whilst the vaccine is great for the vulnerable, it's only this bizarre collectivist mindset that requires kids and healthy youngsters to have the jab. With a degree of risk from the jab, but scarce threat from the virus to youngsters, Whatever happened to first do no harm? Well, it went out after the hellish marriage of big state and big pharma. Communism is a hateful regime in which it's seeking division at every turn. Divide and conquer and all of that. Well, we're seeing it now with ideas like critical race theory, which is a contested view that the colour of your skin marks you out as inherently prejudicial. It's a controversial idea currently being peddled in our civil service. We're paying for it. Take a look at this. There you go. White civil servants told Britain is racist in woke training video. The programme tells staff they must recognise their privilege, be an ally to ethnic minorities and never contradict them. Pretty patronising to people of colour, that, isn't it? And arguably racist in so many different ways towards everyone. Now, racism is the most evil stain on humanity, but the only answer is for all of us to come together, to reaffirm that we're all Brits. We're all human beings. We're all precious, and we're all brothers and sisters in the eyes of God, whoever your God may be. But when it comes to the Church of Woke, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Here's the academic Matthew Goodwin on Twitter this week. New data, he writes, doesn't fit the narrative. Progression rates into British universities by ethnic group. Chinese, 81%, Asian, 65%, black, 62%, mixed, 48%, white, 39.7%. White kids on free school meals, the least likely of all to go to university, just 13.6%. We must tackle poverty and inequality and lift everyone up as one community. But this new wave of communism hates all of that. It hates the flag, it hates nationhood, it hates family, it hates history, and it hates unity. Its only currency is division. It's a very communist idea to rewrite history, which we're now doing with Britain, a country which exported liberal ideas, democracy, free speech and free enterprise. Oh, and after century of slavery, we were the first global power to bring slavery to an end. But this new variant of communism is infiltrating our institutions, including schools and universities, who would have you believe Britain's a dreadful country with a shameful history. Well, shame on them. The RMT union, meanwhile, is said to be seeking a general strike in which all of our industries down tools, supposedly to improve the lot of workers. But what will it really do? It will bring down the government, perhaps something they want. But it will be something more than that. It will be step one in dismantling our capitalist system, one which has seen unprecedented prosperity and has lifted billions out of poverty globally. Since the economic horror show of the 1970s, Britain has become the fifth biggest economy in the world, and that was not achieved by communism. It was achieved by capitalism, which is now a four-letter word. What our country stands for is under attack. It's the collective over the individual. It's the state over families. It's the ideology over science, wisdom, experience, and common sense. So-called wokeism is a cult. They're a bunch of utter cults. Woke ideology sees 5-year-olds coming home from primary school asking their parents if they're racist, and which thinks it's okay for grown men packing a full meat and 2 veg to race past women in the swimming pool or break their neck in a rugby field. Are we going to wait for the first life-changing injury or death of a biological female at the hands of a trans woman in sport? This new wave of communism, Communism 2.0, is the virus we can stop and the virus we must stop. And we do it by falling back on the values that make this country great. Reason, argument, free speech, fairness, tolerance, freedom, democracy, individualism, and basic human decency and dignity. The extreme woke left, that millions of Labour supporters hate as well, they loathe this country and are seeking to destroy everything it stands for. If we yield to wokeism, which is communism in all but name, if we yield to the hard left, we will be left with nothing at all. Marks my words, communism is back, and we have to defeat it all over again.